and thus causes a more equitable allocation of costs based on the costs that the users themselves impose on the public good, namely the roadway. Third, it allows a model in which the road usage charge can be collected by private operating companies in an open system that provides for low administrative costs. And this is a model that is used in places like New Zealand and Ireland, where private companies collect a fee on behalf of the government. In the case of New Zealand, it's a heavy vehicle truck road usage charge, and in Ireland, it's tolls. Finally, the advantage is a road usage charge really fulfills the user pays principle. And the user pays principle just means that the payment all comes from people who use the product. So the user pays principle is consistently ranked on many public opinion surveys as being equitable, an equitable way of paying for public goods. It's essentially similar, it's essentially treating roadway usage as a utility, similar to electricity or natural gas. And that really is a logical thing because it's provided for by a state monopoly, the DOTs, and we're just paying for it in a true utility format. Third, it really guarantees consistent funding for transportation projects so long as the funds, the revenues from the road usage charge are actually ring-fenced or hypothecated for transportation usage, which is a policy point I certainly strongly support. And fourth, it corrects the inequity of the gas tax. The gas tax is inequitable between high and low mileage vehicles, especially for low-income individuals who are often forced, because they don't have enough money, to buy older and thus lower mileage vehicles, so they're kind of forced to pay more gas tax, and that inequity is corrected by a road usage charge. Now, there are solid responses really to the main three arguments against distance-based charging. Against privacy concerns, the way you overcome these is to offer user choice. You need to offer at least one true manual system, which is based on reading the odometer or paying a flat fee for a year. But in addition to that, you can offer automatic collection that does not use any location data at all, and you can offer automatic collection that uses equipment provided by the user, namely the user's smartphone, and you can use automatic collection that uses in-vehicle electronics, the telematics systems that are in vehicles. If you offer all these options, the privacy concerns can be relieved. Second, the urban-rural equity concern basically is the perception that rural drivers would be more disadvantaged by the RUC because they'd have to pay more. The response to this is that long-distance drivers in rural areas already pay more gas taxes because they have to buy more gas, so they're already paying more. And the one countermeasure to this particular phenomenon I just described is that when the gas tax is not possible, when users don't choose a more fuel-efficient vehicle. Sorry, I'm not capturing that very quickly. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next reason because I want to keep within my 6 minutes. But essentially, I mean that users aren't choosing, the rural users in many surveys aren't choosing more fuel-efficient vehicles to pay lower gas taxes. And finally, in general, rural trips are longer but less frequent. Rural commutes are often shorter than urban commutes, and urban drivers, in fact, often have longer commutes. So the total distances driven by urban and rural drivers are actually quite similar, and I've seen this in a number of different state survey data. Third, against the cost argument, using these private open systems providers, like those that are used in New Zealand, actually reduces the cost of collection to a very manageable level, distinctly below 10%. It's also important to not compare the cost of road usage charging to tolling because the scale is really different. You're collecting it across all state roadways. And finally, it's important to always note that the cost of gas tax is consistently underreported because gas tax leakage is never really reported, and there are very high gas tax leakage rates even now that you have dyed red fuel and diesel, and there are a number of surveys that support that. Next slide, please. Finally, just a couple of remarks. The change or transition to a road usage charge will begin at the state level, and this is just similar to the sales tax. States are acting as the crucibles of democracy where their policies can be refined and perfected, and both federal and state governments should support this, but the change clearly needs to be at the state level first. Second, when passing a distance-based charging bill, all the states should focus on revenue sustainability and not other goals like congestion reduction or environmental improvement, because this solves the most pressing problem, minimizes political opponents, and the other goals can possibly be added later. Just a few real quick caveats. Using road usage charges does not preclude an increase in the state or federal gas taxes first. These can happen. These are quick and easy measures for a legislature. Second, it doesn't preclude building new toll facilities. You know, we currently pay gas taxes on toll areas, and there's no reason that this couldn't continue in the state of road usage charging. And third, it may take a very long time to phase in a road usage charge, and the road usage charge may never include all internal combustion vehicles. So just very quickly, the next steps I see that are that the states do more research on road usage charging. Hopefully Oregon will pass a bill in this legislature. Washington will move ahead. Nevada and Minnesota, which are both actively working on trials, will move ahead. And the many other states, including Vermont, West Virginia, Florida, Texas, and others, will also move ahead, and we can start phasing into a distance-based charging future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. That was excellent. Thanks. Now, Bob is now, his connection is now established. I'm now going to sit back, and you won't hear from me again until the question. So, Bob, it's all over to you, sir.
Yeah, well, if the audio goes down again, you might not hear from me till the questions either, Kevin. Okay, Matthew, I'm assuming that you're actually agreeing with the motion then that the only viable future. Okay, cool. Do we have any of our speaker panelists who'd like to take 7 minutes to disagree, to say that fuel-based taxation is okay? If nobody else does it then.
I guess I would say that maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but I think that it may be the only viable method from a technological perspective, but it may not be the most probable one from a policy perspective.
Right.
And I mean, I'd be happy to elaborate on that. I could probably take 7 minutes to do so, whatever your choice.
Yeah, tell you what, why don't I be really provocative, Hal, and then I'll hand over to you and you can clear up the mess.
Okay.
Okay, Matthew, I completely disagree with you for the following reasons. Number one, there's nothing wrong with the current fuel-based taxation approach that a change from fixed to percentage to proportional tax wouldn't solve. Number two, it's a very efficient, low-cost mechanism for collecting tax. It's probably cheaper than any distance-based taxation approach. Number three, a relatively small number of large companies actually provide the tax to the government, so it's well under.
Hello, Bob. Are you back with us?
I think we lost him.
I think we have lost Bob. What? In that case, sorry about this, everybody. Harold, why don't you just clear up the mess already that Bob's already created?
Well, I'm not sure that I can clear up the mess.
Well, maybe not clear it up, but with your clear it up with your own.
Let me say, let me just throw a few points out here. I should have probably prepared a presentation. Matt did a great job, I think, in his presentation. The issue here is not one from my perspective of technology, nor is it even really one from financial. Let me go back up and clear up a couple of points. It's not just the fact that revenue has reduced that is required for rebuilding, and I speak mostly here from the U.S. perspective, that is required for rebuilding some of the aged interstate system, which carries the vast majority of our freight, which, by the way, 87% of the value of freight in the United States ships on a rubber tire, and that most of that is on the interstate system. So that's our predominant focus for distance-based charging in the U.S. But it's not only reductions in revenue, it's also increases in prices. From 1961 until 2011, granted, long period of time, 657% is the CPI growth. Now, if you were to look at construction indices, I dare say it would be even higher than that. So $1 in 1960s when we were constructing the interstate bought an awful lot more of infrastructure than it does today. Secondly, the cost of reconstructing under traffic is more expensive than building those miles of interstate out through Kansas and the western states. So there's a significant sort of double scissor effect here from the revenues reducing and the prices increasing over time. That's the financial piece. Technologically, I mean, we could talk about that all day, but I'm quite sure that technologically everyone on the webinar is probably familiar with the various technologies, and we know that we can do it today, and new technologies are coming, some of which I was working on just this morning that I think are going to be even more, make this even more viable technologically. The issue is one of policy. And we talk about utilities and paying for use, electricity and so forth, and I'm one that frequently speaks from that perspective. But the issue is one of perception of use and the perception of the electorate. There's a couple of issues here. One is the sort of the man on the street, the two-axle vehicle driver that commutes to work and so forth, and their perspective is that the interstate system's been paid for. And secondly, that some of the basic citizens' rights are to transportation. And I would argue that we certainly wouldn't want to be thinking about tolling every single mile of the entire roadway system, but only those arterial systems. But further than that is the freight side of things. I think there's going to be a huge resistance in the trucking industry that currently has only 3% profit margin. And any costs that go up in the transport of freight, again, remember 87% of the value is on rubber tire, any increase in that freight is going to be passed directly through to the cost of the good that's shipped, and therefore have a negative effect on the economy in a time when, in the U.S. again, in a time when we're trying to find our way back out of the abyss that we've been in economically. Is someone trying to say something? No? Okay, then I'll continue on. To me, the question breaks into a couple of pieces here. First of all, I agree with the previous speaker that the states have done much to move this forward, but states can't individually undertake this. It has to be a federal process in the U.S., and everyone is fully aware of the kinds of issues we have at the federal level right now to reach agreement on major questions, let alone talking about something that's down on their radar screen like mileage-based charging. And we've had proposals in many states now to just increase the gas tax. I think Virginia recently said they were going to increase the sales tax to 16%, and then they turned around, that didn't float. They've now said that they're going to go with a, I think it's 15 cents per gallon increase in the gas tax, big change in gas tax rate in Virginia. So these methods get thrown out, and the politicians and the electorate, at least historically here so far, have thrown it back into, okay, we have needs, therefore let's raise the gas tax. I'll pause for now with that.
Okay, Bob
Ray, thanks
is
very
back
much,
on
Hal.
this. Bob, can I just quickly get in there? I was going to read the questions out at the end, but there's a question for Hal that's just appeared from Tim McGuckin. Hello, Tim. Tim's question is potentially provocative. It says, can Hal go into more detail about the new technology he was working on this morning?
No.
Okay, thanks, Harold. Bob, Bob, do you want to take that over? Tim, I hope that satisfies your question.
I can't.
Fine. No, that's. I don't think
course,
he imagined you could, but there you go. Bob, I'll come back to you.
No, I can't.
Okay.
Well, of course, Hal, we're all now completely fascinated about the new technology you're working on. So, okay. One concern that I have is, are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater by getting rid of the fuel tax? I mean, is it possible we could fix the fuel tax by making it a percentage of the price rather than a fixed amount? I'd be interested to hear what Hal and Matthew have to say about that.
Well, as you know, we've done that in Florida on some of the proportions of the gas tax. We have several gas tax rates here in Florida, and some of them are indexed to, some are indexed to the CPI, and some are indexed on a percentage basis to that. Others are fixed. Some of the older tax laws are fixed as a proportion of the total gas tax. But that is an option to try to keep up with the costs of the construction. I mentioned before, we're a 40-year period, we've increased 60, almost 700% in the cost of rebuilding infrastructure, not to mention that construction would be more, and not to mention that rebuilding under traffic is even more costly. So we're probably looking at 10 times the cost over that 40-year period that we got to make up for.
May I respond? I definitely think that is a possibility to make the fuel tax as a percentage of cost sold, but that really only solves one problem, specifically the problem of the lack of an inflation track on the gas tax. It really does nothing to prevent erosion due to the increase in fuel efficiency, which I think is the driving factor. I totally agree with Hal that the lack of indexing to inflation and the increasing cost of goods are driving factors in the costs of reconstruction. But this is something that we have to deal with no matter what the finance mechanism is. I think we all agree that we need good roadways no matter what. So we've got to find a sustainable solution to do this. And I'd also like to respond to Hal's comment about freight. You know, Hal, again, you're absolutely right. Many freight companies operate on around a 3% profit margin. So there's absolutely no question that any costs would be passed on the goods that they are selling. But I would argue that's a good thing and certainly not an economically dampening effect, because what that means is they have good roadways to drive on. Those goods can get there faster. We have enough money to actually build the roadways we need to get the goods there on time. And I mean, the cost of transportation is an inherent cost in any good that is purchased. I don't think gradually transitioning to a distance-based charge will inhibit that. And I would just point out one example of a case where the use of a distance-based charge has not caused any financial inconveniences to the freight carriers, and that is in the country of New Zealand, where they've had a distance-based charge for, I think, 25 years or so, or 35 years, and their system operates very efficiently. They have good roadway funds available, and in the last 3 years, they've adopted or allowed electronic collection of this fuel tax, which has cost the government of New Zealand almost nothing. It's almost free as a service to the government of New Zealand, provided by the private providers that sell fleet services to the commercial vehicle fleets, and the cost of the provision is subsumed in the cost of the fleet services. So I basically that's my position.
Could I respond?
Sure.
You know, it would be great if we had trillions of dollars to solve the problems that we need to solve tomorrow morning. And it would be further great if we could snap our fingers and have that trillions of dollars the day after put into improved roadways. The truth is, it takes 12 years from beginning until end to build just a transportation highway project. Secondly, today, a husband and wife team can take a 18-wheeler from coast to coast in 6 days. You can't get much faster than that. And I know by driving out there in my RV, most of them are doing a little better than 70 anyway. So they're getting there just about as quick as they can today. The issue is not one of getting there quicker. The issue is that as this continues to deteriorate, we'll eventually get in a position where they can't get there at all.
Yeah. I could also mention that road disrepair, I know this specifically for the state of California, but I suspect it's generally true. Road disrepair in California causes more accidents, fatalities, and injuries than drugs and alcohol combined. And that is a true statement today.
Wow.
It sounded like we were agreeing with each other on the last 2 points, actually.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know where Bob is there or Kevin.
I'm here. Has Bob gone?
Bob
Has Bob left
Bob
us?
is off again, I think.
Bob has left us again. Yeah. So I think Matthew and Hal, you've had some time there. JR, you've been waiting very patiently for Harold and Matthew to finish disagreeing then agreeing. So JR, if you are still with us, it's your turn to take the floor.
Very good. How am I coming across?
You're coming across loud and clear. Perfect.
Very good. So in large part, I agree with Matthew and his point of view, and I'll go into a little more detail in my opening remarks on some of his statements. So I think it's an accepted fact that increased vehicle fuel efficiency is eroding our ability to fund roadway infrastructure maintenance and expansion with simple per gallon fuel tax revenues. The gas tax is simple, but it's simply unfair now in 2013. A properly implemented